And hello, everybody. This is Laura Ward. We're doing inner and outer space on Zoom. So this is a Zoom class, which is open and available and pretty much free for anyone who wants to come on Thursdays at noon Eastern Standard Time. I have been thinking a lot about the crystalline forms, the platonic solids, and how the fact that things nestle within each other, and how that if we look at a cube, we could think of the cube as if we were actually just touching the faces of the cube, we could do the dimensional cross of axis touching the faces of the cube. If we're working with the octahedron, we would be touching the corners. So I've been really thinking about how we conceptualize this space. And in the Laban work, we're usually moving from corner to corner. But last time actually Gregory was here, he thought about like, what is it like to travel along those edges? So I wanted to think about that a little bit. And I also just wanted to share with you just some art, which some of you have seen, but like here, there's like a cube inside of it's inside of a triangle, but we could imagine it's inside of a tetrahedron. So it's like the stacking nature of these forms in space and how really they're all just fitting into each other. So that's one. And I have one more that I want to show you. And this one is actually Anthony's, but it gives you a kind of image of the body in there. I'm trying to do it so I don't get too much glare. And if we looked at this like here, there's that would be sort of like the octahedron. And if we split this thing up differently, we could make it into a cube. But it's again how we kind of have the image of our body being inside of the space. And so just, I feel like the more sort of mental imagery that we have, the more pictures we have, the more we can access that. So I actually wanted to start with imagining. We can do this with our eyes closed. Just closing eyes and first of all, landing in your body. Landing in the sensation of being in your body, which may include your proprioceptive awareness, your kinesthetic awareness, your interoception, the awareness of the activities happening within your body, but just tuning into your body as a space for a focus, as a space to be present from and with. So in this idea of body as focus, there's so many possibilities. Like I can focus on the feeling in my shoulders. I can focus on my breath. I can focus on the feeling of movement in my body. I can focus on my belly, or I can focus on the space around my body, my skin. So many options to focus on with body. So let's actually just start with the focus of our feet. And if you wiggle your toes around, it might give you a little more sensation of your feet. But the sense of our feet connecting to the ground. And we're just going to use the idea of imagining our feet maybe in the sand, or imagining our feet in some dirt, or maybe imagining our feet in some mud. And as you're in those places with your imagination and your feet, maybe letting them squish around a little bit. So, or let the sand move through your toes, just whatever you think would be most delicious or interesting, and bringing that awareness. So we're combining imagination with actual sensation, and we're putting the two together. And then let's take that sort of up the back of our body. So maybe up the back of the legs into your butt, into your sit bones, into your tail, into your pelvis, and imagine that part of your body also in whatever you're touching with your feet. So whatever your imagination is taking you to, whatever might be fun, or maybe it's a pile of feathers, who knows? Maybe it's hard rock, maybe it's water, but imagining that sensation of the lower body being in that. And whatever that is really earth-based, connected to the earth. So finding a sense of grounding and a sense of gravity or gravitas in this space of the bottom and the back of the body, connecting down into, and then adding the imaginal with it connecting into whatever would be an interesting thing. And then from there, we're going to imagine that we're imagining we're in a cube. So we're going to imagine that we are sitting inside like either a big square room or imagining inside of a dice. And if any of this is triggering at all, which it could be, feel free to let that go and come to a happy place in your body. But imagining yourself in, if you can be there happily, in the space of a square, a three-dimensional square, a cube that you are inside the middle of. And in that space, just tune into the sensations of your body. Does your body want to move in that space? What part of your body wants to move in that space? What places in that cube are of interest in your body or in your mind, in your body mind? And then maybe find the walls of your cube with your imagination. So you can reach out into the space, finding the surfaces, the flat surfaces of your cube. Where are they? Letting your body participate. So maybe finding the flat surface of the ceiling, the flat surface of the floor in your imagination, but you can use your arms or you can use a body part to sort of move within the squareness of that cube. Bringing in movement into the imagination, or into the actual body. So letting yourself move. You don't have to stay still. Yeah, let yourself find the space around you. Imagining that you are inside of a cube, and instead of touching the corners, you're touching the flat surfaces. And then you can sort of imagine, you can push your cube walls farther away, or you can draw them in towards you, nestle into it. Squareness. It's very sort of stable. And then start to find the corners of your cube. You can open your eyes if you want and see what other people are doing or not. Just you can stay in the imagination, finding the corners of your cube and finding different ways of reaching into the corners. So you can cross to reach into the corners. You can open to reach into the corners. You have corners in the back, you have corners in the front. Just finding those corners, the high corners and the low corners, and sort of conceptualizing that space around you and traveling within it if that's interesting to you, if it's interesting to you to let your body move. And then letting yourself travel along the edges. So finding the edges within the cube. And maybe it's the edge of the surface, and maybe, it could be very literal or very sort of playfully imaginative where those edges are, what those lines are like. And just feeling how you feel in there. What is the sensation? What's arising? What's interesting? What changes if you work across your body as opposed to in an open way? Crossing maybe in the back, crossing in the front, or taking two arms into a corner instead of one, or some other body part. And just seeing where's the movement starting and where is it ending. Nice. And I'm going to bring us back together. Oops, I just muted everybody. So you can unmute if you want to say anything. Anyway, just what is arising for you in that sense of cubedness, of being in the cube? What are you noticing, and if anything?
I felt myself initially, and it was funny, just before you said it, I found myself spread eagle against one of the sides, and my movement was to flip from side to side as if I was turning a page, and the page was turning in different directions. And for every turn, every flip, the scenery would change. Like I would be on a mountaintop, and then I'd flip, and then I saw myself on a beach, and then I'd flip again, and I was in the water. And it was an amazing experience, a travel experience. I was going from place to place around the globe, basically from my memory. I was pulling up scenes from my memory from traveling. And as I flipped from side to side, and every angle, another scene or another locale came up. It was a wonderful journey.
So let me ask a question about that. When you arrived in a scene, what did you notice first? Like, what were the sensations? Was it a visual thing? Did you feel things? Like, how did you sense that? What senses came online for being in each place?
I think the light was the main thing, like the blue sky, or when I went to the forest, I saw the shade of the trees, or basically felt the coolness in the shade of the trees of being in a dense forest. And so the light changed as I was going from place to place. That's made it more easy to identify where I was going or where I'd just come from.
Oh, that's so interesting. Super cool. How about everybody else? Did you guys have anything like that? Did you have anything pop up for you?
Well, when you told us to imagine a cube, I saw myself in the frame of the Zoom camera, and I saw the rectangle I was inside. So I was trying to see the cube outside the rectangle of my frame. Some more geometrical idea.
I was really interested by the consciousness of the possibility of being triggered by the imagination of being in that box, and that was really really good. And so sometimes, I had a little headache, or sometimes I was sick to my stomach with some of the things, and noticing just all the different sensations uh, combined with either imagination and or movement. Really, really, really interesting.
Interesting. Thank you. How about you, Virginia?
It perhaps I'm in a place where I need a bit of safety, so it was quite a nice feeling of safety to surround myself with this box. I felt better exploring it from the inside and kind of having this imaginary wall against the world.
Thank you. Nice. So let's do the same thing. And if you feel like standing up in this, you can stand up. But I want to play with the same idea with the octahedron. I keep wanting to call it icosahedron. But so what I was thinking about while I was in the shower today, which is where I do my best thinking, my best creative thinking, was how, if, because I ask you, if we're moving inside one of these, which one are we moving inside of? And how, like, the inner space, this has 6 faces and 8 corners. This has 8 faces and 6 points, right? So it's interesting how these two things are kind of like this flip of each other. And yet conceptually, they're very close to each other. So I'm thinking about how, like, our brains conceive of space and the Platonic solids, and how as we learn as children about the outer space, the space outside of us, or conceptualizing space, how close to each other it can be. Like, how if I put this inside of the cube, it's going to touch each face of that die. So, like, using these frameworks that this guy Laban created as, like, these movement patterns and these movement scales, it could be very different the way that we do it. Like, this is just one way of looking at things. And I feel like anytime, like, the creativity of seeing more than just what's obviously being taught is what makes it so interesting for me. So I'm going to stand up. You are welcome to sit down or not. And just standing. So I think here's this great image of this person inside the, well, if you imagine this being the octahedron. So feeling the space inside the octahedron, in whatever way is interesting for you. So first, let's just do it with an eyes closed, and imagine yourself inside this little or big. It could be huge. It could be this massive sort of diamond octahedron, or a very small nestly one. Just imagining that space around you. So you have your sort of points of the corners in the front and the back, in the side and the side, and then up and down, and finding what it feels like to be in that. And I would like to, before let's just explore the points a little bit. So you can explore the points, the up, down, the side, the backward, forward, in your mind or in your body. I mean, I'm still working with my eyes closed. because it changes my sensation of what's going on. But you can open or close. Both arms can go to one point, or one arm can go, or you could do a different body part. You could try your knees. Knees are always kind of fun. Finding that up, down, side, side, forward, backward. Or you could do your eyes. When I do my eyes, I really come into myself and I sort of feel the three-dimensionality of my eyeballs and of the space inside my head, of my brains, of my sinus cavity and my hearing. And also, let's just think about that for a second, how like our visual field is going basically forward in that front space. And then our auditory field is basically out to the side, right? And then our sensation of gravity is in the up, down, in the vertical, our knowing where, like the connection of heaven and earth or high and low, however you want to put that. But just finding what these relationships are within that octahedron. And then, actually, I want to come back together and talk about that for a second. So I know I didn't give it a whole lot of time, but if anything arose for anybody in the octahedron that you felt that was different from the cube before I go on with the octahedron. Virginia, do you have one or no? Okay, I mean, it may not be. I didn't give us a lot of time in there, so.
I was trying to figure out the 8 sides.
Okay, I know, which is why I wanted to come back and just talk one time before, because I want to go to the faces also and think about where they are. Because this is what I was thinking about in the shower. It's like, oh, we've got these 8 faces. So anybody else feel anything that was different for you in the octahedron that was like, oh, this has more space, or this is more something than the cube?
I just always appreciate when we work with the eyes. I feel like that's so rich and interesting for me. So I really appreciated doing that. And I did it with eyes closed, you know, but all that movement is really engaging.
Yeah, I mean, for me with that idea also of the eyes first and sort of the 3-dimensional balls, but then like our hearing is on the 2 sides of our head. So like, how does that relate to that horizontal? And then I thought about like hunters and gatherers, like panning the horizon and coming back to a sense of safety in that primitive like back of the brain by looking around. So, oh, we look around, we see, oh, there's the animal, but how much that also relates to hearing and the pan of our vision, but just how our bodies and our senses are related to these forms. And this is all, you know, this is just conceptual stuff but some of it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of true. So anyone, yeah, anything else to say, or should we go on? Cool. We're going on. So let's think about these faces, right? So if we have our high, low, our side, side, and our backward, forward, where are these faces of our octahedron? So we've got 8 faces. So we're going to have 2 in front, and we're going to have 2 in back. And maybe a way to find those faces is first to find the outline from point to point. Like if I have my high point, and then I make the line down to the front point, and then the line down to the low point, and then the line to the back middle point, and then the line back up to that high. So I've got that one diamond, right? I'm finding that edge of the diamond. And then if I do the same thing, the high point on top, this right out to the side point, and then the low point, then the other side point, and the high point there. Like if I picture that as a rectangle, so I've got this outer scaffolding of edges, then, oh, here are my faces. There's faces here, here, there, and there. Just to conceptualize what those, you know, those flat, it's just, I guess we don't think of that kind of space very often, right? It's really weird, like, okay, what can I do that shows that kind of space, which also, so that I think is what explains to us why we're working inside of the points, because those surfaces, especially in the octahedron, are kind of like, whoa, they're weird. So I want to take us to one more sense of surfaces. If it's easy to sit down cross-legged, sit down cross-legged, or just look at me doing it. And that would be making my body into a tetrahedron, right? So my head is the top point, here are the 2 points, and then my butt is the 3rd point on the bottom. So I have these triangles all put together. Here's my front face, side face, bottom, right? So just finding how our bodies sort of relate into those spaces. And if you have managed to get into this position, or you can see me in it, just imagining what the faces of where those faces are, right? In your tetrahedron, there's a face. Underneath, there's a face. There's a side face and a side face. So feeling that surface area, which in this case, for most of it, is negative space, which actually in all of these things, a lot of times it's going to be the negative space. Yeah. Okay.
Not sure I understand negative space.
Well, my body, so right here, there's nothing, right? In the space in front of me, between here and here, there's nothing there. So negative space is where I'm not. Hold on.
In between. So here, look, my fingers are making a shape. That's a circle shape, right? And this is the negative space that's inside that. And I had a little suggestion with that tetrahedron. So it's the same as what you're doing when you're showing the octahedron. We should actually be sitting with one knee facing the camera. So it's
right.
So it feels like it's the same kind of
but
orientation.
But the tetrahedron isn't 2 octahedrons put together, because it's 3. It's all 3s, right? Everything's a 3. But I do have this is.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. That's right. It's not. Yeah, it's a sexta. It would be 2 of those would be a sexta if you put them together, not an octa.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why. So what a Platonic solid is, or of these, is that all the faces are exactly the same. All the angles are exactly the same. So and there's only 5 of them. There's the tetrahedron, the cube, the octahedron, the dodecahedron, and then the icosahedron, which has 20. This one has 12 points and 20 faces. It's kind of like mind-boggling to think we have all these shapes, and this shape has 6 faces and 8 points, and this shape has 8 points and 8 points and 6 faces. How is that possible? Do you know what I mean? That's kind of what boggles my little brain. Anyway, hey Georgina, Abby, you made it back. Nice to see you. We're in Space Geek Nerd Alert. Heavy.
So at some point, we have to get more into dodecahedron and icosahedron too.
Well, there is, the interesting thing about dodecahedron is there is no scale for the dodecahedron, because it doesn't really relate to our.
Play in there.
We can play in it. That's true. That's totally true. So, well, let's go. I feel like I need to expand so that I'm not just we're doing so much space, right? I know it's called inner outer space, and space is my thing, but Laban has so many interesting things. I feel like it might be nice to add effort to our space. So in Laban, the idea of effort is, it's not the effort meaning how hard you worked. It's the effort meaning the sort of spices that you put into the movement. So in Laban, we talk about lightweight and strong weight effort. And lightweight has a tendency to go up, to rise, and strong weight has a tendency to go down. So these are affinities, and these affinities don't mean it always goes that way. It's just it often goes that way. So often if a movement's going up, it's likely going to rise with lightness and more likely going to come down with strength. So our spectrum of light and strong weight are aligned or affined with the vertical dimension, the up and down. And I have this is my visual aid for the vertical dimension, right? The plumb line, there it is, up and down, vertical dimension. It's got an up and a down, and the dimension is just a single dimension with up and down. And that's for you, Virginia, and for me, it's like another way. So here's my horizontal dimension, right? My side. And then here's the sagittal dimension, forward, backward, which also you can see that's like Sagittarius, right? Boom. And that's front to back. Okay, so my vertical dimension has lightness going up and strength coming down. And that is weight. So that's gravity. We feel that. That's our connection to the earth and heaven, right? Heaven, earth, like this idea. The side is affined with, so we have in Laban space, effort, body, and shape. And the big space is what we're talking about when we're talking about the crystalline forms, but space, we can put space with effort, and then it's more how do you attend to the space or to the space around you, which this can be kind of confusing, so don't worry about it. But this is direct space, and then this is indirect space. Like direct space is pinpointed, it's exact, and I'm crossing, it doesn't have to be, but this is the affinity, I'm crossing my body indirect, like boom, it's right over there. And then indirect, I'm kind of taking in the whole situation. Where is it? Oh, it's somewhere. So space effort is like if I walk into a coffee shop and I'm like, where's my friend? Not that now in COVID, anyone walks into a coffee shop and looks for their friend, but let's pretend. I'm walking in, I'm looking around. So I'm in indirect space. I'm attending to the space around me, not the geometrical space, but the space that I'm in. And I'm indirect. I am multi-focused, but my awareness is kind of outward. Boom, there's my friend. I go right into direct space. So that is affined with the horizontal, the side. And when the crossing is affined with direct, and the opening is affined with indirect. So if you add your eyes to what your hands are doing, you can maybe feel that, like cross, like maybe point at something across the room. And then as you come to the other side, you can, as we're opening, there's more spaciousness. Crossing is more direct, opening is more indirect. So again, it's an affinity. It doesn't mean it always has to be this way. It could be this way. It could be the exact opposite. Like I could be kind of like, oh, I don't know, it's not that direct. Or I could open very directly.
What does affinity mean?
So affinity means it's likely going to be this way. It's like there's a friendship between those two things. But it doesn't have to be. There could be a disaffinity where you do it the opposite way, and that's fine too. But it's just affinities and disaffinities are like, if you go up, it's likely going to be light. If you come down, it's likely going to be strong. But it doesn't have to be. So affinity means it's like there's an interlinking, but it's not a marriage. They're friends. And so that we have up, down, we have weight with that, we have side, we have space, effort, and then we have backwards, forwards, and the sagittal is affined with time. And in Laban, the sense of time is not, we're looking at movement. We're talking about how we see movement, right? So if I see movement that's slowing down, I'm going to talk about that movement being sustained time. It's not movement that's just going slow. It's movement that is actually shifting in time. It's changing its time. And fast is going to be something that happens quickly, and it's changing time. It's not just fast the whole time. This isn't time. It's just a tempo that's going on and on, but something that happens or something that is slowing down. So we think about the affinity of time being with the sagittal dimension, forward and backward. So one way to look at it would be, I'm going forward through like a creepy hallway and it's really dark, and then I touch a cobweb and I jump back fast, right? So like I'm making my way forward kind of slowly, but I'm ready to retreat quickly. It's only an affinity, exactly. Right, so maybe try it. Just try the slow reaching into the room and then boop, pull it back quick. Like, oh, I touched the thing that was too hot. Woo. Yeah, and just feeling like, now, do you want to go forward fast and come back slow? Does that feel as good? So this is how you decide, like you could say, well, for me, that doesn't make any sense, but maybe it does. So these things are just an idea. It's a system. It doesn't mean that it is necessarily that way no matter what. But the interesting thing to do is take these affinities and disaffinities of effort and put them into space. So, but maybe let's play with just, and we can also put them together. So like, here's my image. Like I'm in a room and there's bubbles blowing around and I can see these bubbles blowing around and boop, I pop one. Ooh, I got direct, even though I was open in that, I could cross and be direct. But like, just imagine you're in your bubble room, as one is. there's bubbles everywhere. You can look around, see these bubbles that are iridescent and they're glowing, and then you can touch a bubble and pop it. So we're sort of playing with maybe lightness, directness, and indirectness. And the chances are, if you're imagining these bubbles, you may see them coming down, but I'm imagining my bubbles up here. Maybe you want to imagine them down there, however you want to play with your bubbles, but like popping bubbles. So just to give you a sense of how lightness and directness and indirectness can work together. You're having a good time popping bubbles. Awesome. Okay, so there's one, and these things can combine in what we call states and drives. Like when certain things are together, it can become a state, which is like two things mixed together, like popping bubbles. Oh, that's a state. Or if we go full force into efforts, it could be a drive where we have a bunch of things, three things happening. Like, and actually we've done some of this. Some of you guys have done the movement in the cube, and those are called action drives. So they're like things that happen when these three efforts get put together. So let's play with that, and let's play with it in, and some of you guys have done this a bunch. So if you feel like, oh, I already know this, let yourself layer it into your body and see if you can become more refined with your effort in your body so that you can, yeah, let it become more, I want to say saturated, but that's the wrong word because that sort of implies this like drenchedness. And sometimes these things are desaturated, like they're really spacious and open. So let's just go up with lightness. So we're just going to take our body up as light as we can, and then taking it down with strength, adding some strength to the descent. Whatever, yeah, like muscle work. Yeah, and you can go in your own time, just finding lightness as you rise and then descending with some strength. There are some people who are just amazing effort people. And I don't think that I'm one of them. I'm pretty effortful and all that, but I'm not like, some people are really good at teaching this. I think space is my thing, but I'm just adding it in there to make this more interesting. Or not to make it more interesting, just to layer in the information. So now let's play with the direct, crossing the body with direct space. So direct focal point, boing, pinpointed, and then opening out, really, in the pole dancing world, we'd say serving the sandwich to the entire audience. But we can also think of just sharing like with everything out there. So it's not like this. I'm not kind of in myself doing it. That would not be an attention to space. But here I'm attending to space. I'm out there. So yeah, letting yourself cross with directness, pinpointed, and then opening out, multifocal, looking at all the things, taking in, like, you know, it's like Gestalt or the specific, the detail. So we're working with that kind of idea as we, boom, cross it over, specific, and then open it out, global. Just a way of thinking about it, crossing and opening. So that's the horizontal dimension, the side with that idea. I'm open and I'm open, indirect. I mean, it's an affinity. It doesn't have to be the same thing, but let's go a little deeper with this, and let's just play with the idea of, to add another sort of psychological layer, that in this place, now I'm moving into the horizontal plane, big table plane, yeah, and this is a place of gathering and scattering, of sharing information. So I'm just throwing in another completely unrelated to effort, except for that it's in the system and it felt good to do it. So we can think of this table, this big round table that we're at, as a place to disseminate information. And I can do that in my indirect space as I scatter my seeds of information to everybody, or I can gather it into myself. I can take it and I can put it over there, just giving another idea of however you want that to land, what is possible. And then let's go with the forward and backwards. So we did it actually before, just going forward, slowing down, moving forward, and then taking it back quickly. Yeah, and it's interesting, it's funny to watch it. Like, and that's the thing about time. When we change our times, it gets funny. Like changing tempo is a place to find humor. But it's also, the sagittal is also a place of action. I'm gonna do the thing, maybe I'm gonna do the thing. I'm moving forward. Oh no, nope, not gonna do it, backing off. So thinking of this forward backward as being a place of activity and action and inaction. And just a little piece about that, another CMA, another movement analyst, and I were working together on making a class. And we were just doing the basic scale, the up, down, side, side, backward, forward. And at the time, she was also going through a divorce. And she would do the up, down, side, side, backwards, and she would not go back forward. She'd go anywhere else. Like, she knew this material, but because in her body, she was like not ready to move forward, it was hard for her to do the scale and go forward in the scale. So a lot of times we can also see that our bodies, like the tissue, the behavior, the cellular memory, the imprint, all the stuff that's going on with us can be seen in the world. And we're in this place where moving forward is difficult because of COVID, right? Whatever it is you're trying to do, it can be much more complicated than it ever was before. So it could take a lot longer, or you could just decide not to do it. But just thinking about that relationship of moving forward. And what about moving forward smoothly? Like, just moving forward, like, let's take the time out of it and just move forward really smoothly, and then move back with exactly the same kind of fluidness, the same kind of smoothness, and feel what that feels like to you. What does it feel like to move forward and backward and take the sense of time out of it? So it's not that I'm moving slowly, but I'm not slowing down so much. Moving forward and backward without time. Yeah, and while we're at that, let's do moving up and down without weight. So it's like we are not lightweight, but weightless. So the energy of going up and the energy of coming down is really the same energy of going up and the same energy of going down. Yeah, and I see Georgina is trying to take the space out of that across and open already. And it's hard. Like, the only way to take the space effort out is to really take your head out of it, take your eyes out of the game. So I can cross and I can open, and I'm attending to you. I'm not attending to the space of my movement. So there's sort of a disconnect there. And I'll say this, and often I will not make these kind of judgments it's not really a judgment, it's kind of a call on one culture that I've really seen that can be not so spatial. I shouldn't say it, but they're so passionate and they're so in their thing. But it's Brazilians. I've seen a lot of Brazilians that have had a hard time with space effort because their attention was so in. Maybe that's a bullshit thing to say, so I apologize. But certain cultures are going to have more relationship to things. So we could often say that a lot of Asian cultures, especially Asian women, are going to have incredible access to lightweight. They are so good at it, right? And then we could say that other cultures may have more of something, more stability. And like when we talk about stable, it's usually a lack of movement, right? So our stable state isn't going to have, what is missing in stable? I think it might be, I can't remember, because so each of the states and drives have names, and I'm just forgetting what they are. But it's just an interesting way of looking at it. So to take the sort of external focus out of movement, so that if I take the external focus out, it changes the movement for me. I can take it out and still have interesting movement. It doesn't have to be boring. It's just that I am not attending to the space. I'm in myself. Does that make sense? Let's come in and have a discussion. Oops. It's not to say, when I say that about Brazilians, it's not to say all Brazilians are not attending to space. It just happened a lot. All right. See you later, Michael. Nice to see you. Anyone have anything you've noticed, like different cultures have different cultural, familial embodiment patterns that work. Like there are some cultures that are never going to be direct, and some cultures that are super direct. And when those two cultures meet each other, they're kind of like, wait a minute, I don't trust that person. They don't look me in the eye. And it's like, well, yeah, because in that culture, it's rude to look people in the eye, especially if you don't know them. Like, so there's these different reasons why people may have physical reactions to other people that are on a level, on a sort of like sensational level that's completely not understood by most people's minds. They're not thinking about why this is happening, or even just another person, like a really stable person that's not, there's not a lot of movement, maybe the whole body moves as a unit. And then another person who's like all over the place. Like, how is the relationship going to be? Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's not to say that any of these rules are answers or this is how it always is, or it's just sometimes it's like this. So, anything to say? You're still muted. Were you going to say something, G? Oh, Virginia.
I love how you brought the cultural aspect into it. It so makes sense. I was working in tourism, and of course, we had all sorts of people from different countries, and I found myself, I started thinking, oh my God, I'm racist, and I didn't know it because I hated specific people that always were from one or two countries. I was like, what's the matter with me? I'm discovering I'm racist. And it was a specific characteristic that they all shared that it took me a while to realize it's not that I'm racist, it's just that I feel uncomfortable with the way they carry themselves and communicate. I feel invaded or I feel they're rude, which they're not. It's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was thinking a while back, I've, you know, this exercise with the eyes and I was thinking of that, and a lot of this, when we were playing with the tempo and going, like I couldn't go in fast and then take it back quick. That was messing up my brain. That was very challenging. But it has a calming effect. I was thinking like of some polyvagal exercises that use like yoga twists, and I was thinking of them in terms of the spaces. And I'm I guess I don't know what I'm saying. I'm thinking out loud and it's probably not going to come out right. But I was thinking of the relationship with this thing and the nervous system. And I'm sure there is one. I just can't put my finger on it. There seems to be a calming effect in some of the stuff that we did also last time and this time.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I can speak to on that about the calming effect is that, and this is one, is that if we just slow down, we slow down our breathing. And sometimes when we take out time or when we focus, we're slowing down because we have to focus on how do I do that? So that can bring us in. But another thing is that when we move our body in this sort of balanced way, crossing midline, moving forward, backward, moving up and down, we're doing different things in our corpus callosum. So there's different relationships forming and neurons firing in between. But more importantly than that is that we are moving our fascia in all of these different patterns, and our nervous system is routed through our fascia. So when we're moving, like one is, there's no separation. It's all, you know, wound and wrapped with each other. So I think that when we move in these spaces and we start to kind of, I want to say, tone our nervous system to the environment. Like it gives us more access to existing when we can move in different ways. We can adapt, we can spiral, we can twist, we can become like, we can settle into ourselves or we can reach out of ourselves. So I feel like there's like a lot of, and I'm not coming from the scientific background. Yes, I've studied anatomy. I have studied connective tissue therapy. I've read all the things that, not all the things, I've read a lot of things, but not all the things. But I'm coming from the movement and the phenomenological experience background, and then reading a lot of stuff. But like, I'm not the expert on the science, but I am the expert on the experience and knowing what happens and knowing what I've seen in students and clients when we start to balance these things out. There's a huge effect on how our brain is functioning. There's a huge effect on our nervous system. There's a huge effect on how we co-regulate with other people or are even just aware of what that co-regulation is, you know, just to have some, oh, now because I've spent some time sensing and feeling, and also feeling the things that aren't part of my normal pattern. So I take myself into these spaces with the part of my body that isn't used to doing that. And it could be uncomfortable too, right? It could start, like, depending on what you're dealing with in your cells and tissue and your cellular memory and your DNA memory, like there can be places that like, wow, I really don't like going back to that place, or I really don't feel good about this place down here, or maybe that one up there. Like there can be a million reasons for all of that, or you fell and broke your leg, fell backwards and did something or hit your head. Like all of this stuff can have an effect that's rippling through your energy pattern, and so when you start to awaken or move that stuff, it could be great, or it could be like, wow, now I have to pay attention to this. And in fact, when I was going through the Laban Institute and studying all this stuff, I did start seeing a therapist for a while, because I was like, I need some help making sense of what is coming up for me while I move through these places and while I feel these places. And now for me, I find that the most therapeutic places that I am are my chiropractor, my body worker, my other person who lets me talk about whatever stuff I need to talk about while it's going on. But it's, for me, so much of the entrance to everything is through sensation, through the body, through that connection, as opposed to thinking about it. Yeah. Go ahead, G.
There are something, since I just came off the road, I've been driving for a long time, and part of my going forward and really being intense and sitting and having that action in my body, to sitting back in my seat and observing like what I was passing at that time, and basically being in my little box, traveling, going through that whole spatial, like, and there's, I definitely was going forward in that intense and driven, but I did feel like if I would tell myself to sit back and to relax and to feel my back in the chair and like literally open out, and like instead of having that gaze, like sit back in my chair and look around and have that, that it calmed me down. All of a sudden, like I didn't feel as much tension in my shoulders as grabbing on and being into that forward, but having that and just feeling it in my body. And that's like when just some of this really made me aware of what I've been doing the past week, and of this forward and back, and slow down, red lights, danger. Like going back and then getting comfortable and doing a little bit of a twist and rotate in my little box. So I'm just having like this realization of how I was using my space in that same thing, the tension, the forward, the dynamics of all that. And also even just being there and going, I'm gonna sit and do this with my neck for a while and find that rotation. But it's just interesting to see how I'm feeling as you're speaking of that.
Yeah. Some of the somatic people, I believe Emily Conrad is one of them, the Continuum, person who developed Continuum. And she was talking about how like the tissue in people's bodies, where our attention is going, our tissue is forming to support our attention going in that direction. So if I'm here, tissue moving down and in, and focus down and in. So like to wake up into that backspace, or to pan the horizon. And that panning the horizon, like that's a primitive brain activity. Like, is it safe? What's around me? Can I relax into this? And like, if you slow it down, that is like going to help. That's part of that whole vagus nerve thing. And not just that's how we've known we were safe from the beginning of time. And sound, hearing, what's happening. Like when we can listen to the sounds around us and bring our awareness into that. Yeah. Abby, you were there, but you haven't said anything this whole time. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I'll say something. Hi, I'm playing with makeup. Yesterday I was listening to this kind of safe and sound protocol that I was just really curious about, and feeling my body feeling weighted and slow going left, but easily being drawn and uplifted and feeling very light going right up. I'm like, oh, Laura's gonna know more about this. What is that?
Well, I mean, for everybody, we have a whole different reality of what all these spaces mean, right? Because our histories are different, our families are different, or whatever. Even the way that we were schooled, like, was there a window on one side? Where was the door? Just so we have a way of taking in all of our experience in our physical body. So like when I studied Laban, it was the first time I'd ever been in the classroom where there were no chairs, there were no desks, there were some physio balls, there was a studio, and like you could roll around, you could bounce on a ball while the teacher's talking. And in fact, I had one of my teachers didn't like me at all and was like, Laura, you're always in the back moving around and it's so distracting. I'm like, I thought I was allowed to do this. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What? Like, I'm like, yeah, because that's how I can pay attention way better than trying to be still. Like, let me bounce on the ball, I can take it in, or let me do some extra activity so that so that my focus can listen, right? As opposed to trying to be still and listen, which is really challenging for me.
Got it.
Yeah.
And actually, you're right on. There was a window to my right. So I was like, yay, floating over that way. Thanks, Aya.
I mean, that's not the whole answer, but that's maybe part of an answer. Yeah.
Was. Yeah.
Anyone else want to say anything to speak to that?
Laura, I have to go, but I just wanted to thank you once again for, I'm taking away a morsel from this one. Last time it was pay attention to your attention. Today I started out this meeting by telling you that my hip was really sore and my movement was going to be limited, but then you've put my mind on focusing on the rest of my body, and immediately the pain in my hip went away. It literally, I felt the sensation of my toes in the sand, and the ache just dissipated and disappeared. So thank you once again for a wonderful class, and I'll see you next week.
Yeah, thank you, Gregory. Nice to have you.
Thank you.
That's great. So I think I'm going to stop recording. And everybody, as I say always, if you made it to this point of the recording, you have an attention span. Congratulations. Woo! Something to be celebrated. So have a little celebration in your body. You did it. Yay. You did something good for you. Maybe. I hope. And I am putting this up on the tubes. There are classes coming from when I started doing this, and there will be continued classes. All right. That's the